So, welcome to another interview special for AI in Recruitment, a podcast series where we explore the exciting and rapidly evolving world of artificial intelligence in talent acquisition and recruitment. It's a mouthful. Today, my guest is George LaRocque. George is best known for his work with WorkTech. He's been at the forefront of analysing and advising on the exploding market of work technology. Welcome to the podcast, George.
Jasper, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here.
It's a real pleasure to talk to you again. I think the last time we spoke was at RecFest in 2022. I remember because you gave us a really interesting interview. As I just told you off camera, Recruitment Tech has always been sort of watching you and looking at what WorkTech does because your reports are pretty much just industry standards. So firstly, there's a feather for you. With all the developments currently happening within what you call work technology and the work tech industry, how is 2023 shaping up so far?
Well, that's a really good question because, like everything we're living through with the economy, globally, or even wherever you're located in the world, it isn't evenly. It's not happening the same for everyone.
Yeah.
Some are having a great year, some are having not a great year. But when I step back and I look at the industry and I look at the tech side of it specifically, I find myself, sharing the perspective that, we're on track, even with what feels like a slowdown coming off of the 2021 2022 years. We're on track to possibly be the third biggest year in work tech investment, and there's still a lot of adoption, a lot of innovation happening. Budgets are still being deployed. Everything's taking longer. It's taking longer to raise VC. It's taking longer to buy or sell software. Hesitancy is a common theme, but depending on where you're located, what industry you're in or you're supporting, you could be having another best year ever, or you could be struggling.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand that context, but also realize that a lot of the struggle is coming from sort of building up in those incredible, unique boom years, and then the having to adjust as we come back down to earth, if you will.
Is it just coming back down to earth? Because, as you have covered with WorkTech, the sort of investments in work technology have been incredible in the past few years. I mean, they've been record setting pretty much every year. What's it down to, you think?
When you think about investment,
Hmm.
valuations have certainly come back down to earth. So we were seeing companies valued at astronomical amounts through 2021 and 2022,
Hmm.
and now we're seeing companies valued where they might have been, pre like 2019 and previous. When it comes to the the market, the level of investment, we're certainly seeing, as I mentioned, levels that are more in line with previous years that were record-setting years, 2018, 2019, 2020.
Hmm.
When it comes to um, uh, the adoption of HR tech and work tech, we are seeing much increased adoption in the SMB and global markets, that are South America, Africa, Latin America,
Yeah.
and Asia Pac, places that weren't dominant previously. And we're seeing new technology. This podcast is focused on AI,
Yeah.
but AI and other technologies that are driving a shift and a replacement of existing tech and introduction of new tech into the stack, if you will.
Yeah, and that pretty much is a neat segue into my next question because I
Okay.
feel like no one really wanted to talk about artificial intelligence if we even go back November, October 2022, even if we go back to the time where we met at RecFest. Um, what has happened since within the world of work and HR technology from your vantage point? And you can talk specifically about AI. You can talk non so specifically about AI, but I'm curious. What's been happening?
Well, it's a really good question, and again, for some perspective, AI and machine learning was in the market, in our market,
Hmm.
for years, uh, but it wasn't something that we talked about. It was something that you didn't want to talk about with HR leaders because it was like a black box, or it was concepts that were very technical,
Hmm.
and many providers were leveraging it sort of on the back end to provide a better experience. But you talked about those experiences and the business case or the solution that you're ultimately providing.
Yeah.
What happened was in November of 2022, um, Chat GPT was unleashed on the public,
Hmm.
and suddenly the uh, users of technology in every market and ours became exposed to the possibilities, and became more comfortable with those possibilities and the experience using specifically generative AI, and the concept of large language models and what that could do, whether understood correctly or not, became something that every business leader started looking at, you know, uh, if inefficiencies in their business, and where automation leveraging AI could be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's what sort of changed. And now it's not just about Chat GPT or Bard or whatever large language models you're using. Oh, there's a lot of energy and hype around that. It's also opened up the conversation for other forms of AI, and that might be driving analytics or
Sure.
matching or other skills based sort of technologies that are, again, more on the back end, but it's just opened the world up to these conversations with more comfort level, and also opened us up to conversations around ethics, privacy, security, etc. So I think that's what happened.
Good summary there. No, and I think you're absolutely right. Spot on in the sense that perhaps it was generative AI that was the catalyzer for all of this, because now we're suddenly talking about it. There are podcasts out there called AI in Recruitment, so surely something's happening there. But where do you see it headed then? Because I recently spoke to Hung Lee, who said, there's not going to be a single recruiting tool out there without any sense of AI built into it. And it sort of struck me because in a way it feels like some of the vendors out there and suppliers of recruitment technology now are pivoting, almost en masse towards AI, whereas that might have not been part of the business plan beforehand. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but do you think perhaps there's a danger to that as well?
Well, I Hung's not wrong. And I think that it's a very safe prediction,
Yeah.
just given the momentum and the adoption curve that we're seeing um, with this technology. And look outside of HR. Um, I've um, every tool that I use now has some generative AI built into it. I've been invited to beta programs for AI and on tools that I use, that I've had to sign. I can't even talk about. So it's like everybody's doing
Go
it.
on, tell me.
I can't off camera. But so the scary part, or maybe if I'm a pessimist, the unsurprising part is I see a lot of these tools. I'm, before hopping on here, I was talking to an AI based tool for recruitment, and many of the tools are just taking sort of the low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
that things that you're very familiar with if you're using ChatGPT or Bard or any of the tools, writing an email, editing a document, and that's really helpful and efficient,
Yeah.
and interesting technology. But that I can do that using ChatGPT or using those tools today. The fact that it's in the interface is more helpful. But that's the gimmick, and that's sort
Yeah.
of the hype based stuff. So that when I say, if I'm a pessimist, I think a lot of folks ran out and implemented that, without even a real focus on what impact is it going to have, or what kind of content's being communicated. If I'm putting a job ad in an editor like that, that's okay, because I'm going to publish that to the world anyhow. But
Yeah.
if I'm putting a compensation plan in that tool and it hasn't been implemented properly, is that informing ChatGPT for the next user, somewhere in the world, to benefit from? These are things that are, a little scary, and that users need to get used to asking, for about. But it's happening because um, Hung's prediction will bear itself out. It's already bearing itself out. Every
Yeah.
platform player
Right.
has either introduced something or is working on it. The adoption curve, like normally I would say the adoption curve on something new in HR tech has taken, from 5 to 10 years, closer to 10.
Hmm.
Before we would go through iterations before we'd really understand how it's going to be adopted and used. This looks more like 2 to 5. And it will still evolve over time, of course, like all technology, but we're seeing incredible use cases, right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And because AI is not new to us, there was some foundational work done that can now be taken to a whole new level, by existing and new tech players, and every customer, every business leader is wondering how they can leverage this technology. So I think it is happening. I don't think that's much of a forward looking prediction. It's
You're
happening
not a Nostradamus type prediction though.
now. Right, right.
Um, but I'd be curious because you talk to a lot of people who are responsible for producing recruitment technology, and
Mhm.
obviously there's companies out there that for years have, delved into AI and have made their own application. I'll be curious to hear from you if you've spoken to anyone, and you don't need to name any names, obviously, but who may be a bit frustrated with the fact that every piece of recruitment technology is now massively pursuing AI. Whereas, they might go, right, but actually we've done this for years now. We actually know what we're doing. But now all of a sudden we have to compete with all these new AI co-pilots that are popping up seemingly every week. Is there any sense of frustration there you feel like within that market?
Uh, yes. I mean, the market has always been difficult for a tech provider to differentiate themselves. And what that
Hmm.
means for the buyer is to understand what you do that's different, or how you solve a problem.
Yeah.
Companies in recruitment and companies in core HR many times sound like they do the same thing, because the language is so homogenous, so just,
Eerily similar.
eerily similar. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And so, what you're going to see, what you're already seeing, if you're out, attending, if you're consuming any content, if you're attending any events, this fall, it's all going to be AI, and it's all going to sound the same. And so, on the tech provider side, which is what your question was about, it's the difficulty in breaking through that noise, and on the user buyer side, it's the same old problem, which is, my HR platform says it does these things. It can't do everything well. The point solutions say they do these things. Who's really doing it? So it's in many ways, it's overnight compounded the problem.
And when you look at the AI rise, if you will, from a investment point of view and raising VC point of view, has it uplifted the market even more? Because as you just said, the 2020, 21, 2022 were all really high in terms of raising VC for work
Mhm.
technology. Has this just exploded everything into a different world, different dimension?
I think it's a pending explosion.
Okay.
So the uptick isn't felt yet. But when I step back and look at the overall market outside of recruitment and HR and work tech,
Yeah.
there has been an explosion in sort of foundational AI tools for developers to use. So how do you incorporate multiple large language models? How do you protect privacy, ethics, security for someone using those tools? How do you build large language models if an enterprise has enough content to do that? So all of this has been getting massive amounts of funding thrown at it. And what's coming next, and this is where we fit in, is the wave of specialization. So now,
Hmm.
as the developers and innovators are going to take those tools to the next level, if you will, or those concepts to the next level, you're going to see that uptick. What's encouraging to me is, just in the last week, I've spoken with two new VC funds that are raising significant funds to focus just on recruitment, HR, work tech, and especially the fact that they're earlier stage,
Yeah.
which fueling those brand new players, coming to market. I'm chairing the first ever investor forum focused on this in October,
Hmm.
and I'm seeing everyone from angels and hundreds of investors, from angels and family offices, to some of the biggest brand name investor banks, private equity firms, VC firms, all sending someone to focus on this space. Very encouraging. So I think as we, you know, without any unforeseen economic shifts that take us backward, most folks are looking forward optimistically, feel like we've been through the worst of it,
Yeah.
see the opportunity within this space, and I think that wave that you're asking about will be coming.
So these startup founders that you talk to who are,
Mhm.
building their own AI-based application for recruitment, are there any that really stand out to you without revealing their business models, obviously, but are there any sort of applications that you think, wow, these guys have got something here that will actually be of added value? Because, as I just jokingly sort of said, there's a lot of the same stuff out there.
Yeah,
They're branding it the same way, they're calling it the same way. Essentially, they're all creating they're pretending to have invented the wheel, but it's all the same wheel anyway.
yeah.
But you know, is there a flip side to that? Are there companies out there that you feel like in 2 years' time everyone will have heard about them because these guys or girls have got it right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can pick a horse for you just yet, or horses just yet, but I can tell you this: what I'm seeing some of the most interesting things I've seen in a long time around candidate sourcing.
Okay.
I'm seeing. I think we've had a lot of sourcing tools in the market over the years, and there are a couple of leaders there today. Pretty much the same model, sort of building a database, scraping and building a database, and then allowing to search and engage from there.
Yeah.
Um, that model is, there are some new models coming that are going to have more fresher data, more recent data, and then a lot with this wave of AI, the ability to understand that data, understand those candidates, engage those candidates. I'm seeing some really cool things there. At the same time, the whole skills-based movement, um, there was a big challenge before, which was the way the market talks about skills versus the way employees or candidates talk about skills, the way
Okay.
employers talk about skills, even in one company,
Okay.
varied across region to region, department to department.
Hmm.
What this AI does is it translates for you. So I can call myself a designer, and you might call me a software engineer, or an analyst or something, and it doesn't matter that we can't find each other because of that, because the tools can quickly normalize that. And when you think about hard skills and soft skills and how these tools can normalize, and whether it's minimizing change management internally or making it easier for us to find each other in a job search. There's some I'm seeing some of the most, this feels like the move to the web and to the cloud to me. Like the model is so new. The
Yeah.
models are so new. um, you'll see me call some of them out by the end of the year in a report.
Hmm.
But I think it's a little early to be picking winners, because there's a lot coming. But I think the incumbents in the space across the board really need to step back and rethink the old way of how we're doing things, because this tech, it's not just about AI,
Hmm.
but all of the new, more foundational technology allows us to deliver on some promises I think the tech market's been making for a long time that it couldn't deliver on before.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because we're in Europe, as you may well know, as the same would be for Canada and in the US. There's just talent shortages everywhere,
Yeah.
and even though we have all these talent shortages, there are new technology pieces coming to the market every day. But if the talent shortages keep persisting, the technology might not even matter, if you know where I'm going with this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you feel like AI may just give that boost to sort of, I don't know, just shorten the gap, if that's the right phrase for it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. It's certainly not a panacea where everything's perfect overnight,
No.
but I think there's a lot. Think about a recruiter today, whether you're working in the third party, staffing recruitment side, or at an employer,
Yeah.
just leveraging the data that you have, and being able to uncover the candidates or discover the candidates that are already within your data set or within your pool, is a huge challenge. And we're seeing leaps and strides in that. That's helpful to candidates as well as employers or staffing firms.
Sure. Yeah.
As a candidate, to be able to present your whole self, and leverage technology that's going to help me discover the employers and the jobs that I might be, applying to, is huge. And I think that's another big difference here, is that where much of the technology, the exciting stuff that I'm seeing, has the candidate or the employee in mind first,
Yeah.
and
That's
versus sort of the command and control
yeah.
employer hiring authority.
Yeah, and I think that will essentially make the difference because there are so many tools where you go, well, we look at it and we think, "Well, okay, yeah, that could be of added value to the company, but I don't see the added value for, the person having to consume all of that, the
Yeah.
person actually applying for the job." So that's definitely an interesting development and one keeping our eye on. You've just published the third quarter update for WorkTech of 2023. And there's an interesting sentence in there because we read it. Trust me, we read it. You describe it as a sort of epidemic of recency bias within the global work tech and
Mhm.
HR tech market. Can you explain that further?
Yeah, I'm glad you read it. I'm glad that jumped out at you. It's the mid Q3 update. So, the point is that at this point, midway through Q3, as I mentioned earlier, we're already at par with 2018, which was a record year when 2018 happened. It was,
Hmm.
I think, in that those paragraphs you're talking about, I said, the soundtrack was "Happy Days Are Here Again," right? Um, just perspective on what that means. But and the recency bias is for the 6 quarters from through all of 2021 and the first 2 quarters of 2022,
Hmm.
we were operating at a level we had never seen. So we saw the biggest year prior to that, prior to 2021, was 5.3 billion of growth capital coming into the space. In 2021, we had about 18 billion. In 2022, the first 2 quarters were surpassing any quarters we had ever seen, and then we dropped like everybody else did, substantially, not quite as substantially as the broad market, but
Yeah.
substantially. And we did about 13 billion. So these 2 years were anomalies. And that the recency bias is thinking about the way everything was operating, the way the job market was working, the
Hmm.
way capital was flowing into the space, the way the budgets that we had to spend on technology, the freedom we had to spend it, the ability to raise funds, the ability to raise additional funds, all of that. Building your strategy, whether you're an employer or whether you're a tech provider,
Hmm.
on those years that were anomalies, I think is a fool's errand. And but I'm seeing that the recency bias is that's what my perspective of the market today is based on that little time
Yeah.
where where in reality, if I look back for 5 years, we're seeing this year looking consistent with those previous three, and there's nothing that suggests we won't continue increasing or plugging along. Um, we can't build our plans based on anomalies. If you're analyzing data, the first thing you do is remove the anomalies so that you get a more realistic view of the market. And so it's concerning to me because it's not just about my perception of how the market is today, but it's about plans that are being made that are based on the thought that we're going to get back to those days. And I think that's like catching lightning in a bottle. It could be next year, it could be 10 years from now, but I can plan on I can plan more consistently and more realistically, and benefit if those factors align.
So, last question I have for you. Um, with AI, are we set for another anomaly in a year's time, 2 years' time? You just said that it'll be, a bit later when that AI boom will be visible within the market. When do you anticipate it happening? If you can give an answer, of course.
Yeah, I would say, well, based on the time frame that I gave you with the adoption